So good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's guest top talk session. Hi, Jonathan. I know you're in the wings. Are you there, pal?
Hello there, matey. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. And before, I know we've already been chatting a couple of times today, but really, really great to have you online with us tonight. Loved your article, and that's what prompted Sam to get me to call you to do the webinar. So absolutely,
yeah, it's fantastic.
Thrilled for you that you agreed to share some more of your knowledge with us tonight. And as I said, I've already put on a stone just from looking at your presentation, to be fair. So I have warned them, pal, that they're going to be left hungry if they're not already, but not to leave us for at least the next hour anyway, pal. Just before I sort of hand things over and we get into everything, Jonathan, I know we chatted about it earlier. Just give us a little bit of a rundown, really, how you kind of got into the food photography and made that your thing.
Well, food photography, well, good evening first, everybody. Food photography was actually something I was quite resistant to for a good while, and a lot of people actually told me to go and do it because my wife's a chef, and she's worked at some of the top places in the country, so Michelin-starred level. But unfortunately, when it comes to shooting food, you want to get a lot of pretty food in front of you. When you're married to a chef, they're at work all the time, so it kind of made the beginnings quite slow. But once I started finding different ways and more interesting ways to find food to shoot, which I'll be sharing with you tonight, you start to get some momentum for it. And I went, you know what, I start to really get involved in this. And of course, being married to a chef, chefs they're the biggest celebrators of food that there is out there, possibly with the small producers and farmers and that kind of thing. But very few people have the fire in the belly that a chef has. So you kind of get to the point where their passion and their drive to do the best with food, it's contagious, and you start to pick up on that and learn new things and understand where everything comes from. And before you know it, you're kind of hooked. And part of me then didn't want to do this is because I don't like I don't like being really pigeonholed. I like to do lots of different parts of photography, and then rather than spit my dummy out and saying, oh, I'm not going to do that, I started looking at more interesting ways and varying ways that I could get all sorts of different types of photography all centered around food, because it's such a huge subject. So it's almost like there's endless amounts of things for me to photograph based on food or tied to it anyway.
Brilliant, mate. Absolutely brilliant. And of course, as you guys can see on the screen at the moment, and we always share, Jonathan does want you to interact with him. So obviously there's the website, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and obviously, Jonathan, you co-do the blog with your wife, is that right, Salted Mint?
That's right, yeah, at saltedmint.com. That's it's mostly Deb, and I taught her how to do the food photography. So a lot of the food photography on a kind of a daily basis of the dishes is actually her doing the photography. We do bigger projects, and we have clients coming in. So for those bigger ones that we get together and we work together, it just makes it more efficient, more fun. But yeah, this for me tonight, I'm thrilled to be here and pretty humbled, to be perfectly honest. This isn't about me and showing you all the fancy stuff I can do. Yes, I've got pretty pictures, but you work at it, and this is to share some information that you can get your versions of whatever it is I'm doing and do something new with it. That's really it. So if you've got any questions, I'll stop at various points through the webinar, and if you've got any questions, fire them at me, and even afterwards.
Absolutely.
Send me an email or whatever. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, let's get everything running smoothly for you then, Jonathan. But brilliant, you just prompted exactly what I was going to say. We want you to interact with us tonight, please, as always, guys. So any questions you have from Jonathan, please pop through the question panel, and I'll have them ready for him. Jonathan, I'm going to hand you the screen, so it's going to come over to you now, and I'll let you know when we can see everything clearly at our end. So it's coming over to you now, mate.
Okay, perfect. Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming in and listening to me chat away about food, and I hope you've all eaten, because you'll need something to eat by the time we're finished, I reckon. I've been dealing in food photography. I guess I've been working in it full time probably for the last 5 years, and doing only food photography. And I get asked the question quite a bit, and that is, what is food photography? What do you do, in fact? Well, it's more than that. Why is it so important? And when you think about it, food, everybody has a story that's related to food. Food touches all of us, from memories of you with your gran and with family picnics and restaurants you went to, celebrations, friends you were with. It just, the stories just, everybody has stories of it, good, bad, and ugly, you know. And those sort of stories I started to sit down and think about, and I sort of reminisce a bit. And then I moved my thoughts to, well, what's all involved in the food that we eat? And I often talk about just a piece of broccoli on your plate on a Sunday dinner. You know, when you think about how many people are involved in getting that piece of broccoli to you, it's thousands of people, and that's without getting involved with, you know, the manufacturers of tractors and transport and all of that, just the people that are actually growing the food and getting it to you. It's just thousands of people. And food is just one of those special things that throughout human history, it's been bringing people together, you know, around a fire, around a mealtime, around a celebration. And when you get people together, you know, there's friendships are built, stories are shared, business deals happen. It's just a magic that gets people together. And if it's all around food, it's such a yummy celebration, isn't it? So when I think about the food and I think about telling the stories of it. I go to the farmers of it, the people that are right literally in the grassroots, if you like, in the dirt, growing these things. I took this shot in Yorkshire of forced rhubarb a couple of years back, but it was looking at the lengths that people go that we never hear about them. All of these people with all of these stories, the lengths they go to bring us the things we take for granted that are on all our supermarket shelves. They spend their lives developing skills and techniques to grow the best sort of stuff, the best foods and produce that gets sent to our tables. And then I go on to the other end of things. This is a shot at the Ledbury in London, a 2 Michelin-starred restaurant. But obviously being married to a chef, I have a deep understanding of what chefs do in order to bring the food to your plate, to turn it from grassroots, basic stuff into some truly beautiful, fabulous stuff. Every person you see in this shot, and many, many chefs after, they spend their entire lives developing their skills in order to do the absolute best they can do with the food that they get. So once again, you see people giving over their entire lives to food, which was just fascinating to me when I stopped and actually thought about it, which, like most people, I never did before. And when you get all of this together, the final results can be the most beautiful and delicious sort of things that you've ever seen. This shot was for Art Culinaire magazine at the Typing Room in London. That's Lee Westcott's restaurant. And what I see chefs producing is just phenomenal to me. I just don't understand how they manage to think of these things. So how do you get started in your food photography? I can only base it on kind of what I've done and ideas that I've had to help other people that have spoken to me about it. So where do you get your ideas? And it's pretty much all over the place now. There's food everywhere. There's food on the TV. I mean, there was all the way through the 80s and the 90s, but now, I mean, it started when I'm showing my age, but the Galloping Gourmet and all of these kind of things in the 70s. I used to watch as a kid, and then we got to the 90s. There was a whole bunch of TV shows, and of course now the chef, food, Bake Off, you name it, it's out there. But books and magazines are easily the things that we can get our hands on to get some inspiration about it. It doesn't have to be like Art Culinaire, which is high-end chef's food, but you could take the components of a dish from there and still have the same flavor combinations, and then plate up a nice dish of food and photograph it your way. Restaurants in your area are always a great place. What's your favorite restaurant? Where do you like to go? Where do you like to spend your time, and why is that? Sort of pick it apart, and then you kind of find out what type of food you might be interested in having a go at, or maybe you're a bit more advanced and maybe you want to approach that restaurant and offer to do a shoot, so you get to photograph that food and see the challenges of it. And the biggest one that I see for food right now is Pinterest. There's a little snapshot there of my wife's Pinterest board. But there's just about anything you could type into there and you will find endless amounts of photographs for it. Now, when I started going in food photography, I told you before that I was kind of struggling a bit, although my wife's a chef, she was always at work. So I thought, well, what can I do just as a project to try and get myself going? So this is exactly what I did. I gave myself a project. I started with colors. So I had green, red, and purple right here. And I would just get things that were green and I would photograph them, and I wouldn't do any dishes with it. I would just take their raw nature and photograph that and see how I could find new ways of looking at it and seeing details of things with tight shots that you perhaps couldn't see. So kind of a bit macro-ish. And just trying new things out, but you could go with colors, vegetables. You could do like potatoes, how many different ways you can do potatoes, or citrus fruit. Oh dear, it's breaking the teeth for the dog. Hang on. Citrus fruit. But nature, really, the natural products that you can go and buy at any grocery store or farm market, they are some of the best subjects ever, especially for macro photography. Then you got food festivals and food markets. Most major cities have quite a few of them. This particular one is Eat Street in Shrewsbury, which was held in September, on a cold, very windy September. And obviously September in the UK, it's dark. It was really dark. And right behind me is a great big church, right behind the camera in this shot. So there's not a lot of light coming from that direction. And I hadn't long got a Canon 6D, and me being the way I am, big heavy-handed so-and-so that I am, likes to really push my camera, you know. So I went into this basically black hole and decided, right, let's see what this can do. So this is actually shot at ISO 20,000, which I've never done before because I'm not a bit of an ISO guy. It just doesn't normally happen for me. ISO 20,000 f4 at 1/60th of a second. So it gave me the opportunity to be able to go out there and shoot this kind of thing. But you can find food festivals all over the place. Go online, find out what your local ones are, and you can get yourself out there. It's really open to you. There's no restrictions. You can go out and shoot these festivals, get to talk to the vendors, and maybe you'll get a couple of tight shots, a couple of shots of the dishes, and they'll send them over to you. And often you get the food for free as well. So, hey, there's a bonus. But this was also there. This is at East Street, Shrewsbury. The nice thing about going there at night, as opposed to typically these festivals are in the daytime, is just having all of the lights and the different colors of lights just gives you a whole new different vibe. So it was actually really cool to go there, where a lot of food festivals are in bright sunshine in the summer, and you don't quite get that feel, but you just get a different type of feel for this. Just opportunities to get out there with your camera. This one, if you're interested, ISO 12,800, f4 at 1/60th. That was with a 2470 f4 lens. Image stabilizer is a big help on that lens. But I'll get to lenses and kit in a bit. Small businesses that you have nearby, food businesses, there will be hundreds of them all over the place. You just got to get out and have a little look for it, and get on the phone or pop in and say hi and say, I'd like to come over and take some shots, you know. In return, you can give them a handful of photographs, and you get to practice your craft. You get something different for your portfolio. This was Flour Water Salt over in Macclesfield, Cheshire, who do some of the most astonishing sourdoughs ever. You often see them at, there's a market last Sunday every month, and it's just slipped my mind what it's called. Anyway, but yeah, you'll find these bakers and small producers all over the place. Just get in touch with them and find the businesses that you cherish. Like me, I love bread. It's been my worst enemy forever. At the same time, it's a bit of a love affair with sourdough right now. Take the things that you really love and go and hunt them out and ask them if you can come in and do a photo shoot for them. Most of the time, you know what, they're pretty open to it. They'll ask you, why do you want the photographs? You know, just building a portfolio just for fun, and let them have the images. So yeah, that's one of the easiest ways to do it. Just get out and ask people. Before I head on to the next bit, have we got any questions, Jay?
We've had a couple come through, which is, well, I think you just said you're going to touch on kit, because one of the questions was specifically about now with obviously mirrorless and DSLR. So obviously if you're going to cover that, we'll hang on to that one.
Okay.
I thought this was quite nice that came in. We've had a few about kits, so I knew you were going to talk about that anyway. But the one that came through, which was quite nice, I don't know if you want to talk about it now or a bit later on, but talking about trends and predicting trends, and somebody said that at the moment it seems to be kind of favouring the bird's eye view with a rustic sort of feel. Do you find that, or how do you think about trends in food photography as it goes? Is there, is it trendy as such, or, do you try to mix it up? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, you'll see some of the stuff a bit later on. I think I started with quite minimal kind of look, and then we started moving to more props and things, because you look on Instagram and there's a lot of people propping things up, quite a few really nice blogs, and usually the ladies that are doing these blogs, and they have a real eye for style, and it kind of works for them. I found if I tried to do it, or we tried to do it, Deb and I tried to do it, it wasn't quite our thing, probably because Deb coming from the chef world of all clean lines and stuff, and we tried it and it didn't kind of work as well for us. So I think it depends on what you feel most comfortable with, because if you're more comfortable with it, you're obviously going to do a better job. Yeah, you've got to have a take a look at what's going on. If you look at stuff over in Australia, there's some stunning stuff coming out of there, and a lot of it is very clean lines, not too much propping involved. There may be some colors, some nice color mixing, but not too many in the bright colors. I think we're moving away from bright colors and being a bit more toned down with that. But yeah, you take a look at the magazines and see what's going on. But even if it's moving in a direction that you don't feel comfortable with, then trying to do that, it will become obvious that you're not comfortable and happy with it. So you got to try and stick with what you do. Most of the trends is less about the coloring and the looks. It's more about the food itself. That's the thing that you got to look at. And there's so many forums now online and things to look for, and there'll be people that are leading these kind of movements of healthy eating, perhaps, or this, that, and the other. Was cupcakes a while back, a couple of years ago. But keep an eye on what they're saying, what they're doing, because they're the influencers that kind of change people's habits, and the market shifts towards whatever it is that they're talking about. That's really all I can suggest. Yeah. Again, with the influencers, like anything else that you'll go for, find someone who's speaking to you that you relate to, and kind of take their influence on board and mix it with your own, and come out with your own recipe for what it should be. Who knows? You could be the next leading edge. You don't know.
Brilliant, pal. I'm going to hang on to the other ones because they're a bit more generic. So if you want to crack on, and then you just prompt me with the next time ready for questions.
Okie dokie. So the next stage is when you've decided you're going to be creating, you actually going to get into your little studio or a home or wherever it is that you're photographing. You need to create a story around it. Like we said before, everybody's got a memory and a story around food. So when you're creating a dish, you want to kind of think about all the different aspects that come into all the different dishes that you shoot. For example, what if we're going to be doing a breakfast dish? So it's going to be like yogurts and granola and fruit and that kind of thing. And if it's summertime, because you're going to have fresh fruit. So you're going to want a light and bright kind of feel to it. That kind of helps tell the story. Maybe a bit of a golden glow to it. So whether you can create a golden light through your window light or through flash, or maybe you just need to tweak the white balance a little bit afterwards just to bring a little tiny bit of warmth into the colors. But also having like warm colors in the dish itself, that then makes it kind of, it has more of a glow to it from there. You really want to try and think about where you were going to have this dish. You don't have to get really complicated. It doesn't have to be War and Peace, but if you're having a bowl of stew, it's kind of wintry, gritty, kind of dark, a little bit darker. The light will be lower because obviously the sun is lower in the skies. You get longer shadows, where summertime shadows are short. Light is a little harsher and tends to be a little glowier than it is in the winter. Winter is kind of bluish tones in the light. So that will sort of dictate the kind of story that you want to you want to bring to it. You know, you wouldn't try and do a bowl of stew with rustic bread with bright and light summery light. It just kind of doesn't work. So if you take this shot here of the golden raspberries, everything in the shot has that golden warm look. I really wish I'd turned that raspberry around at the front there, but there you go. I can't do that now. I have to do it again. But the light coming in is kind of warm, has a warm tone to it. And I think I remember rightly when I edited it, I tweaked it just a little bit more, just to get a little bit more warmth into it. But because of all the tones in there are warm, light picks up the color that it hits. Therefore, you get a nice warm kind of glow to this. And now you take this celeriac soup, which is obviously more of a wintry dish. So the light on this has a much more sort of a starker, colder sort of look to it. Even the styling around it, even though the wood has a warm tone to it, it's kind of more moving more towards the blues, so it's cooling it off a little bit. Even the blue that you get inside the dishes, you see, the dish in the center of the frame has a blueness to it. The green is a colder color, so you get these colder elements and much less of the deep warm color. So that kind of goes with the type of dish that it is, and the textures. It all kind of goes towards a more of a wintry look. This is one of the styles that we did. It was more propped up than we normally do, with the nutcrackers and the spoons and all of that stuff. You could also, you could try and do like a golden light with this kind of dish too. I mean, sometimes the juxtaposition it works, but you know, sometimes it's as simple as changing the white balance so you can see if it works or it doesn't. So not such a big deal, but maybe worth its trying. On that shot, you can see all the different elements and different layers in it. In the shot you're looking at now, these eclairs, it's the same thing. Whether you're shooting top down or you're going more of a 3/4 shot, which I tend to do both depending on the dish. If it has height, I'll go more of a lower angle, like a burger would be or something like that. If it's a flatter sort of thing, sometimes a top-down works, or you can do a bit of both. But you do have to build up layers in the photography that you've got. Now, if you look at this shot, you see the stone textured background. It's all the same muted colors, but you see the stone background there, which is just a tile from B&Q. From there, you've got the textiles underneath, which that's just a tea towel. It's got some texture in it. And above that is the serving dish. So all of these things become layers that build up. The dish is kind of the same height as the cooling rack. The lines on the towel and the lines on the cooling rack are kind of going in the same direction. Sort of deliberately casual, if you know what I mean. There's the layers in the food itself. So you've got the pastry, the chocolate, then with the nuts on top, and it comes over to the side of the plate. There's layers there with the bits of the chocolate and nuts. So you're doing all this to give visual interest, but as long as the light is right to the main subject, which is the on the plate itself, then the other things just enhance it, but they don't distract it. If you have textures and food that are contrasting, so you've got smooth layers and textured food, that works well. If the texture on the background is heavy and the texture on the food is heavy, they kind of compete. So you want to kind of take that into account. So like any photography, you often think about the different elements front to back. If you're doing landscapes, it's like that, what's in the foreground and what's in the background and midground. With portraits, you're doing the same. Make sure there's nothing perhaps in front that is going to distract, and what's the background looking like. Well, food photography, we layer from the top and we also layer going in. So with this particular shot that we're looking at, you've still got the stone tile that it's sitting on, which is the same as it was on the previous shot, same tile. It has almost no impact on this shot, but it's just there as a tone. Then you've got the rough textures of the textile that's underneath the bowl. The cutlery is actually overlapping slightly, so that actually gives another bit of height and interest, just as your eye roams around the shot. The layering of the pasta in the dish, when you're putting your food in, be more careful about how you place your food. Don't sort of put it on like you're in a rush ready for dinner. Take your time, get your hands involved, and sort of give it some lift, give it some volume. Even if you had to put something like an upturned a small upturned cup maybe in the bowl that will give that elevation. It gives it much more interest in the food itself when it's something as simple as pasta. You got the crumbs on the top of the cheese and the herbs. That's another layer again on top, and then of course we're looking back into the frame, and the second bowl over at the side. Both bowls, if you notice with the colors, this is another part of food photography. You got contrasting colors, you got warm and cold tones. That always works well together. And then of course the elements at the back, if we took, I think we took the shot without the glass and the water bottle in the back, but there was just a big empty space, so we put them in as just graphical elements. Not that you wouldn't have a glass of water with your meal. And then that little piece of green that you see to the right of the glass, that's just a nice little piece of color, a little bit of herbs. It could have well have been accidental, I don't know, but as I'm looking at it, that brings a little bit of color to that, and the background has a texture. Because it's so out of focus, it stops it being just plain black, so it has a bit more interest. Now, we've already talked about this with the props. The shot of the celeriac soup that we saw before, that was heavily propped with lots of things, or you can go minimalist. I tend to, actually the shot you're looking at here with the chocolate tart, it's kind of in between. So there's no right or wrong way to do this. It's whatever it is that you really like. You can have lots of design elements which you can pick up from antique stores, car boot sales, garage sales, even, what do they call them, reclaim yards. You can get them from reclaim yards, little things to add in, pieces of metal, tile, all sorts of different aspects, little old pieces of like kitchen utensils and that kind of thing. Most food photographers love propping up with all of those different elements. Or you can go minimalist, which is very much nothing but the food. This is what you'll see in a lot of high-end restaurants. Not all of them. There are a lot of them, and you'll see some shots later on where the bowls and the plates have a lot of texture work in there, and they complement. So when you're at that level as a chef, you can very much complement your dishes even with stuff that you might think wouldn't go together. But they're pretty much experts at that kind of thing. There's also in France, my wife and I are going to go to France at some point because we've heard of these markets that you can go to, and apparently they have tons of old worldy stuff from kitchens and farmhouses, and they're next to nothing. So maybe we'll hire a van and go over there and pick up a whole bunch of stuff. Next we've got a lot of stuff going on in this shot. It's actually, there is a wider shot here, but it's cropped in for the presentation. But with this lemon drizzle cake, there's a lot of action on the lemon drizzle cake, and there's a lot of stuff going on. This is probably like the heaviest prop shot that I can remember doing for our blog. This was kind of at the pinnacle, I think. After this, I started winding it back and went the other way. But you're telling a story with this, even if it is a busy story. It's planning a trip. You know, there's a slice of cake, there's a coffee, there's a camera. You can just see the lens actually with the crop at the top of the frame. But that's kind of what we were doing with it. We got these old maps and old postcards. But as you can see there, when we talked about the layers, there is so many different layers in here. There's the map, and then the postcards, and then the other map in the bottom left corner with the fork. Then there's the plates that come up at the next level on the board. Above that, then it becomes the actual cake itself. And when you slice the cake like this and lay it down, there are multiple layers building up to the main event, which is, of course, the fruit and stuff on top. So that's about as busy as we got with this. It's kind of fun, but I struggle to make it work in a way that I'm happy with, I think, when it gets to real heavy propping. Although I have a friend of mine, B, who she puts in like sheet music and pages out of a book, and she puts it in and styles that way. I don't know how she does it, but those things would never be there, but she makes it look like that's exactly what you would expect. And that's her style, and that's her skill. And she's comfortable with that, and it shows, and it just works. When I do it, it doesn't. But I have to be me, and she will be herself. Oh, just a second. Don't know what happened there. Anyway, we're back. So next frame is the complete opposite. This is the minimalist look. So this honey Dijon chicken, we actually shot this for our meal plan. It's a fast and fresh meal plan. We shot this a few weeks back now. But this is very much minimalistic, white plate, white background. There's actually a fake marble look underneath, and if you see, there's some little details there in a white textile, which these are all little elements in which otherwise it would just be white, but you want to get some details in there. And then of course your eye just gets drawn directly to the chicken itself, which again is layered up from the coleslaw that's underneath to the chicken laid up on top, 2 slices of lemon, that kind of thing. It's very subtle. It's very kind of Donna Hay. If you've ever seen her stuff in a magazine, subscribe to her magazine. It's a pretty cool magazine, give you a lot of ideas. And that's the kind of the minimal look, and this is where I'm kind of liking at the moment, but I may wander back again. Have we got any more questions, Jay, at the minute?
Yes, they're coming through thick and fast, Jonathan. No fear of that. They're not in any particular order, bud. So I think it'd be just as easy for me to sort of. We haven't. I'm just going to check. I haven't missed it, have I? We haven't talked about kit. And,
No.
No, that's fine.
No, we haven't done that bit yet.
I'll hang on to that. That's fine. Okay. So I had a couple of questions in a row when you were talking about getting started, and you were talking about not being afraid to get in touch with your local restaurants and ask you to photograph. So a couple of the questions that came in was, at what point do you transition from the portfolio free shoot to start looking to marketing and actually charging for your work? What's the best way to how do you know, for a start, I guess, and how do you get started with that?
When do you know? You don't, because your brain will tell you that you're not ready, and it's one of those that you don't go charging in knowing very little, or at least a lot of people don't. But it can be very difficult. That it's very much about your individual comfort zone. If it's taking you completely out of your comfort zone, it's a good thing. But you do need some skills. You need that foundation of skills underneath that you've practiced, so you feel comfortable with changing your shutter speeds and your apertures and stuff on the fly, reacting to different lighting situations. So if you, like the first restaurant shoot I did purely natural light. That was at the Dairy in Clapham, London. And you know what? Prior to me doing that shoot, I had 0 restaurant photographing experience. The reason I went there was my wife, who's actually at Taste of London right now, she was there working, and Robin Gill, who's the chef and owner, he was one of the chefs that was working on her venue, and she told me about this guy who was fantastic Irish chef, beautiful, beautiful food, and he had this restaurant in Clapham which had a beehive and a herb garden on the roof. I just thought, this just sounds too good to turn down. So I sent him an email and I asked him if I could come in and I could do that, and I was blessed that he granted me basically free reign in his restaurant to photograph his food. When do you know? I would definitely get yourself to the point where you're comfortable changing your techniques and your exposure based on a changeable lighting situation. So practice. I was probably doing at least 8 months of trying things out before I went to a restaurant. But I knew I was competent enough to react to different situations. I had some ideas of what sort of settings I would do for top-down kind of shots, what sort of depth of field I'd be looking at, what my camera gear would do, how it would react. So, I'd be looking at trying to take 5,000 shots in a month or something like that. Just really, if that's what you wanted to do, then really go at it. Put yourself into all sorts of situations, buy food, the supermarket, and photograph that. So try all the different scenarios that you see online, and then take a look at what you've achieved compared to what you see there. So there'll be a similarity but only in a technical way, not necessarily in a food styling way, because you might not be able to make it look as pretty as something you see in a magazine that has an entire team of people. But when do you transition is that is very much about an individual choice. I think it's when you feel that you could do it, but it also scares the pants off you to go in there and do it, not because you don't know what you're doing, but because you're stepping into the next level. That's when I would go and do that.
Brilliant. I know we're going to get onto kit and stuff, but one of the questions that's come through quite a few times, especially obviously looking at the image that we've got on screen at the moment, are you using anything specifically specialist-wise for the overhead shot? So is it tripod-based, is it a boom arm, or are you just handheld?
Nope, that's actually flash. That's been shot with flash. I very rarely use a tripod. I actually don't like having that restriction myself. If I was doing, like I've done some commercial work where we're doing a full layout and the camera needs to stay still, and basically we take some shots, we take a look, we look at live view on the screen, and we'll kind of style live, if you know what I mean, then that's when I'll do that. Or we may have a specific setup and you're literally pulling things out and putting different subject in. I'll lock it on a tripod and do that. If you're using natural light, unfortunately in the UK it does tend to disappear on us quite quickly in the winter time. So yeah, you do need to have a tripod, but it's amazing on a long exposure how pretty the light can look when it's dark and gloomy outside, but a nice long exposure with the right white balance setting, and you can get some beautiful light from that. So I know my wife uses a tripod a lot because she doesn't do flash photography, but this time of year, of course, we have beautiful light. Walk around your house and find where the nicest light is. You know, your north windows in the morning and your south windows in the afternoon. There's all sorts of things because light picks up the color that it hits. So if it's a cloudy day, you kind of get a bit of a bluish tone to it. But sometimes the clouds are dirty looking kind of, and you get more of a warmer, browner tone. Outside our window, we have the wall is painted kind of a cream color. So when the light comes in, it slightly warms that light up. If you've got a red brick wall outside, it's going to pick up that red. So bear all these kind of things in mind when you're looking for ways of or windows or sources of light to use without getting too technical into the flash and that kind of thing. The lenses themselves, there's nothing fancy. That's a 24-70 f4 lens that I shot that with. There's nothing particularly specific about it. When I shoot with flash, obviously the flash duration is what helps freeze the action. It also gives us the flash itself gives an extra little sparkle, I find, to my photography. And I'm probably shooting about 1/25th of a second, I think, or something like that, 1/60th maybe, probably max sync speed, or not far off.
Brilliant. I was just scanning it because you just answered a ton of my questions in a row there, so I was just working out which ones I've missed. So we've talked about obviously your self-use, look for the natural light, but your studio flash user as well. But that's brilliant. So I'm tick that off my list. I think this was early on in the conversation, but let's just ask it in case. Somebody said they felt that sort of your images were square, and is that the industry standard? But I think you've just actually done that to fit tonight's presentation more than anything. Is that right, Luke?
Yeah. There's they're in a different crop to the full shot that you would normally see. So yeah, I don't usually crop to square. Even when I put it on Instagram, I tend to put on as much of the full image as I can do. If I wanted to do square crop, I would probably create a matte in Photoshop and plop them into that just to make sure I got a consistency and I know exactly where the image is going to go. But no, not particularly. I tend to not stick things slap bang in the middle of the frame. I do shoot those shots in case I need them, but I don't tend to find I use them. I kind of like to scooch things around the frame a little bit.
Great. This came through a couple of times, which is quite interesting and actually quite relevant, really, because I don't think we've touched it yet. With regards to enhancing the food, so do you use anything that will actually, to create shines and so on, but then obviously makes the food, is it inedible? I know there's some tips and tricks in there to enhance the way things look, or do you tend to not do that?
No, I am absolutely dead set against anything you put on the food which would stops it being edible afterwards. It's about, for me and my wife, it's the respect for the food. I know a lot of people put things on there, very high-end commercial shots. They put all sorts of things on there to give them the look that they want. We shoot pretty quickly, so it comes kind of straight out of the kitchen and straight in front of the camera. When you got shine and stuff like that, if like meats and things are looking a little dry, then just a little smear of oil is usually enough. Spritzes of water too, you can use that. I would use other things if it was like on perhaps a bottle of beer or something like that. I think glycerin, I think, and water you can spray on it, helps the bubbles stay on the bottle. I don't tend to do an awful lot of that kind of thing, but we would never ever put anything on the food which would stop it being inedible. It's kind of a respect for the suppliers and the food and the animal and the whole thing. It's kind of, I know it sounds like I'm a tree hugging hippie, but it's that respect for the food that we will not sort of compromise.
Brilliant. I was expecting this one, and it was actually it came through a few times in the pre-registration as well. Tips for dealing with reflections in plates and glassware.
You get the angle of the light right. It's a bit like having a reflection in the glasses. You know, when you're shooting somebody, you just change the angle of the light so that it doesn't bounce straight back into the camera. These plates, they're white, but they're not shiny white. They're kind of a semi-matte sort of thing, which definitely stuff to look for. Generally speaking, yeah, that's probably the easiest way when it comes to plates and dishes and that kind of thing. You don't always have that. You'll see in a couple of shots later in some of the restaurant stuff, there is highlights that come in, but if I don't find that they detract from the food. There is a source of light. Everything has a source of light, so our eye is used to seeing things like a little reflection or a little bit of a window, you know, a reflection of a window. If it's not distracting, if it's not like the hottest spot on the image, then I wouldn't worry too much about it. If it's bothering you, then you know you need to start to look at flagging off the light to prevent it from hitting that particular spot.
Brilliant. Jonathan, I have got quite a lot of questions yet, but I'm also looking at the time, so I'd obviously like us to carry on with the main part of the presentation. And of course, guys, you know, we will answer all of your questions, so if it does mean that we went over slightly. So, Jonathan, I'll leave you crack on for now, and I'll sift through the questions. A lot of them you've answered, but I'll make sure we've got them nice and ready for you.
Okie dokie. Perfect. Nice, mate. So, yeah, this came up just the other day when I was, Deb was doing some shots, and she came to me, she says, I'm just not happy with what I'm getting. And these 3 shots are stuff that I took, and it was interesting for me. It was because I found a new way of sort of teaching her the difference with the crops. Cropping is one of the most powerful things that you will do in photography, I find, and with food photography, it's really big. So for me, this shot on the left, I'm going to go pretty quick through this actually. This shot on the left is just too central for me. It looks like it's half cut the dish, half the dish, and we're symmetrical top and bottom pretty much, and I just don't like it. It just bothers my eye. But very, very slight differences. Not to say that any of these shots are the bee's knees, but I just want you to see, if you look at each individual shot, the different crops, where the one in the center there, we've moved slightly down and to the right, so it's a little bit more of the dish. You can see kind of a little bit more where the spoon is going round, and it just feels a little nicer than it does where everything is kind of symmetrical, chopped. The first one kind of looks like it's not casually enough cropped. It's not telling the story. It just seems a little bit too structured. Same with the last shot there, where we've moved it up a little bit and over to the right. So it has a different look and a different feel. It sort of draws you in a little bit more. I find that anytime there's any symmetrical issues, you look at the food and then immediately your eye kind of goes, oh, that's not quite the same as the bit at the top, but it's almost the same. And it bothers your eye and it bothers the subconscious mind. Even if you're not conscious of it, it is happening, and people will dislike a shot. They won't necessarily know why, but the power of the crop is really quite phenomenal. This, as somebody's made a comment, obviously these are cropped a little narrower than is the full shot. But when you crop wide like this, where you're doing a top-down shot, this is kind of a nice-ish shot. there's no drama about it. It's almost product-y when you shoot top down like this, and it gives all of the elements, and it's kind of nice. But you could get a lot more interest with the crop that you use. So you might want to get a little bit more intimate with stuff. So the shot on the left here, this is exactly the same setup. Nothing has been changed from the top-down setup that you'd seen. I just moved over, I walked around, changed my viewpoint. It's now kind of backlit, as you can tell by the shadows, but you just get in there and it kind of just makes you want to get your spoon and dip it in there. Same with the lettuce wraps. We did a top-down shot where they're all laid out, but when you see that there, you almost envisage that's your hand holding it, and you're just about to pick that up and take it in and get a good mouthful of it. That's the intimacy that you want to bring in. You want to, don't be frightened to push in tight and get those intimate shots, because often they're the ones that people look at and go, ooh, I'd just love to get into that. Natural fruit and veggies, that kind of thing, they're really good for getting tight shots, macro kind of subjects again. So when you're taking you've got like a wider shot, work the scene. Once you've put all the effort into making a scene, work it, get yourself moving around it, come around from all different angles. Some stuff will work, some stuff won't, but that's how you'll learn certain crops and certain approaches that you'll really enjoy later on. It's that intimacy that you can see of the food. It's not ugly food. It's very doable food, which is the whole point of this kind of food and this sort of photography. For me, that nice little brown piece there on the left of the muffin, just at the top, I just kind of want to reach in and pinch that off. And that's what you want people to kind of look at and go, ooh, I could just grab that little bit there and have a taste. That's what you're trying to get people to do when they're looking at your food photography. And when it comes to really pretty food, how do you get prettier food? My hero is Joe McNally, a New York photographer. Some of you probably know him. I don't know who told him or whether he's the first guy to say it, but I remember him saying, if you want nicer photographs, put prettier things in front of your lens. And that always spoke to me, even when I was struggling to figure out what type of photography I was going to do. But when I started working with chefs and in restaurants, that was the difference for me. That took it to a whole new level. When it comes to chefs, certainly at the level that the guys that I work with, they're all mostly come from a Michelin-starred background, 1, 2, and 3 Michelin stars. Even if their restaurant doesn't have it, that's their influence. It's very much art on a plate. It's like still life. What they're doing is they're building different emotions into their food. It's a big deal when you go to a fancy restaurant and you go out. So they're bringing in all kinds of different aspects of ambience in the restaurant and the whole balance of food on the plate and how it looks and the light that can hit it from the restaurant. All of these things, they spend thousands of pounds setting these things up and many, many hours creating these dishes. It's much more of an occasion when you're shooting these dishes. This is just a chicken Caesar salad, but the way they plate it up, it's just pretty food. Now, I'm not doing anything different with this than I was doing with the casual food, but when you get the opportunity to work with these chefs, it just can take your photographs to a different level. I find it also pushed me harder right at the beginning, still does. They put so much effort into creating these dishes. I'm going to give 110%. Even the dishes themselves, if you notice the lines on the dishes, they all lead into the plate. All of these details sort of come in when you get into the restaurant level. And you could say that these dotted lines they also lead to the edge of the plate, but because they break away towards the inside of the plate, inside of the rim, this is how the plate manufacturers work with the chefs, so the whole thing works together. This was shot at the Manor Clapham, another one of Robin Gill's restaurants. As you can see here, there's a lot of texture in the bowl, a lot of texture in the countertop that it's sitting on. But it seems to work with the dish. A lot of his stuff are in quite deep bowls. So when you have a low-level food like this, top-down shot kind of works really well, especially when they're pouring on a sauce or something. Your angle, if you wanted to shoot them in a bowl, you want to come in at a steeper angle just to get over the rim of the bowl, and so you don't get this out of focus big lump of bowl in the foreground. So bowl work tends to be top-down. But here you go, here's a bowl that has very high food in there, stacked up, and you can see the reflections here. So we were talking about how do you get the reflections in the bowl, how do you get rid of them. I could have photoshopped them out there on the right hand side, but they're the windows on the other side of the restaurant. It was shot at Times Square Putney Bridge, and it's a natural light photographer's dream. There are big windows all around you from either side, but they wanted shallow depth of field, very focused tight light on a black background. So very studio-esque, really. I had to recreate that. So that was a gridded octa, a black tablecloth, which I took with me, and high shutter speeds to kill the ambient light or kill some of it. And basically it is just my octa and a reflector on the other side bouncing some light back in. And now, since we're just about to move on to the gear, so I'll not wait for questions. We'll just crack on. Moving towards that, the age-old question of RAW or JPEG. Well, I used to shoot RAW and JPEG, and now I just shoot RAW. I shoot tethered on most of my shoots. I shoot quickly, but I don't shoot a lot of frames. I'm very deliberate about how I shoot, so I don't have to wait for a lot of time for the images to get through. I'm not going to tell you it's right or wrong, but my analogy of RAW versus JPEG from a food photographer's point of view is JPEG is like going out to the supermarket and buying a chocolate cake. Now, unless you drive like a lunatic on the way home and it rattles around your car, it's basically going to be a chocolate cake when you get home. If it has rolled around your car, the most you're going to get out of it is a deconstructed cake or like a chocolate trifle, but basically it's still a chocolate cake. When you have a RAW file, it's like buying the ingredients for the chocolate cake and coming home and deciding you want to make chocolate brownies. Pretty much the same ingredients go into it. You just decide to make something different. There is much more that you can do with the RAW file than with the JPEG file. Having said that, I do tend to get 90% in camera, so I probably could get away with JPEGs, but you know, there are times when Thunder Thumbs here has changed the settings on his camera. Maybe I missed a shot or I just grabbed a shot of some action, and having a RAW file has been able to bring that back, bring a little bit of light back or bring it down a little bit, or push and pull the file that much more that I can get it the way I want to. So I just basically stay with RAW. Storage is cheap, so I don't really see an issue with it, but whatever works for you, really. Some people don't like processing in Photoshop. They think it's cheating, when of course the JPEG file is processed, but it's processed in camera out of your control. With the RAW file, you have full control of what aspects of the image you bring out in post. So here we go. What's the best camera and lens to use for food photography? Well, there really isn't one. It's the best thing I can say is start with whatever it is that you've got. I can guarantee you'll be able to get some great shots with whatever bits of kit you've got, even if it's just a phone. Especially, and if you know the camera that you have, then you're already most of the way there. You know how it works. You know what it likes, what it doesn't like. Where you're going to shoot your food is very much what's going to dictate the type of camera you're using. The camera I use the most is the 6D at the moment. I do have a 1DS3. Doesn't like low light, but in nice light, it's awesome files. I'll probably be changing it up again soon. But if you're working in kind of a studio situation where you've got beautiful light all the time, then you know there is no reason to get the latest, greatest, fanciest piece of kit. You know, there's no struggling with the light and getting the image the way you want it to. when you start getting for more professional stuff, it's usually because you're in much more demanding environments and you're pushing the camera harder to get the looks you want. It's one of the least interesting parts of photography to me is the gear. I'm not really a gearhead. I do get excited if I can get a piece of kit that is going to make my life easier, but it's not about having the kit. It's about making my life easier and making it easier to get the shots that I want. I do have a post on my website where I hired the 6D to do a shot Paradise Garage for Robin Gill in London. I had to go back 2 days later to do another part of the shoot, and I borrowed a 5D Mark III, which was the latest at the time. And I did the same shoot, same environment, same lighting. I got the files back. I could see very little difference in the files the way I shoot. So I went for a cheaper option. They're not the same camera at all. If you read the review, well, it's not really a review, but it was just my thoughts on it. I just saved myself a bit of money and got a piece of kit that worked. If it stops working for me, I'll sell it and get something else. But the key is don't just follow what everybody else does, because everybody's got a 5D Mark IV now or Mark III. That doesn't mean that's what you need. It's about getting something that works for you and what you're shooting and the environment you're shooting. Buy something based on an informed choice. So the best lens, well, is whatever lens you've got, just like your camera. They won't necessarily be perfect for that, but find out what you can do by trying it out. Typically the lenses I see used in food photography is 35mm, 50mm, 24-70s, 100mm macro, and sometimes tilt shift lenses. Any of them will work. If I was working in a studio, I could probably easily see me with a 35mm, a 50mm, and a 100mm, and that's it. I wouldn't use any more. Because of the things that I shoot, I do more restaurants. The 24-70 zoom gives me more flexibility, so I'm buying kit that works for me. You need to maybe a 50mm lens is all you need. I know a lot of people shoot food and that's all they have. They have a nice 50mm lens paired with a camera that they're happy with, and they get beautiful results. I rent kit if I'm not sure about it, just like I did with the 6D. Try renting it or borrowing it before you go and buy something. I always recommend getting the best lens you can afford. I wouldn't worry as much about the body. If you're in a nice environment, the one thing that's going to give you nicer looks, nicer color rendition, sharpness is a nice piece of glass. And I rent equipment, you know. If I have a job that requires like a 1DX Mark II or something like that, I'm going to go rent it. If the job requires it and the budget is there, then I'll just rent in the kit rather than sit on 10 grand's worth of kit, which I may not actually need or use for the next 3 or 4 months. So I'd rather just go out and rent it for a day or two. So that's another option. Using macro extension tubes, this is what I used to use to get my tight shots. I pretty much used to use a 50mm lens, 50mm 1.8 for above shots. That lens, my version of it anyway, doesn't tend to be sharp until f8, which was perfect for above shots. And I had this beautiful 85 1.2, you know, a lot of money invested in that lens, and I wasn't really using it. So I got myself some cheap extension tubes off Amazon, plopped them on, and that allows me to get focusing in really tight. With the 85, pretty much it's like 1.3, 1.6 meters or something, whatever it is its minimal focusing distance. So the macro tubes allow you to change where the focus range comes in. So it allows you to get in much closer. You can get plastic ones, you can get metal ones, but it helps you use the lenses that you've already got without investing in a separate macro lens. Very inexpensive. The plastic ones are like 25 bucks or something like that. This particular shot here, as you can see, the strawberries don't look their best, but this is shot with the 85 1.2 with a macro extension tube in it. So I get the crispness of the lens, and it allows me to double it up as a macro lens and get in really tight. I shot this at the dairy in Clapham, again with the 85 and a macro tube on it, and this was a client's job. So I had my 50mm, I can't remember whether I had something else. I think I had a 17-40, I think it was, for doing some interiors. And I had the 85 with the extension tubes, and that's what I used to to get the tighter shots, and the 50mm was there to get the wider shots. Okay, so we can move on to light. Do you want to have any more questions? I know time's ticking on. Do you want me to crack on?
Yeah, I'm going to get you to, if we get through the presentation, Mick, a lot of the questions you seem to be answering now, so I'm filtering them out as we go, and then we can just concentrate on the main ones then that we've missed so far. We haven't. All right,
perfect. So light, natural light or artificial light. There's a huge thing with food photography. I hear a lot of, oh, it has to be natural light. Well, from my point of view, that's nonsense. It is the easiest though, it's the cheapest, and it's one of the things, well, it's not so much easy, it's available to you. But you still have to learn how to craft light. With natural light, you will do an awful lot of flagging of light rather than with flash where you have full control of it. But there's no right or wrong answer. It's use light in whatever way you feel comfortable with. I don't use it as often as most people do because natural light varies a lot. But if we're just doing a blog post, I don't have a lot of shots, I can deal with the varying natural light through the window. It'll have the color cast like I talked about earlier on. Artificial light though, it's very neutral because it's designed like that. It's like supposed to be pure white light. And then I can add any color to it if I wanted to, but it's totally under my control. So if I'm doing a lot of shots like we did with our meal plan, or I've got a client's job, then I'll just use my flash. We could shoot over 3 or 4 days. It's consistent. It's always the same light. Makes editing quicker and faster and gives a more achievable way of shooting multiple dishes. But my goal was always to replace natural light with strobe light. This shot, I can't even remember actually now if this shot is natural light or window light. That's got to be a good thing. This particular shot here, this was shot with window light. It's kind of coming in at about 11 o'clock. But you can get that high key look with window light and different exposures. This is probably a similar setup to how that was done. So you got backlights, you got the light coming from the back. It was too harsh, so we diffused it. We put a diffuser panel in there to soften that backlight. And what you won't see in the pullback shot here is there would have been a fill up front, because anytime the light comes from the back, it creates a shadow at the front. So you need to lift the shadows at the front, but basically you're just sandwiching the subject in between. But the shot on the right is from that setup. This is flash in a softbox. This was for the meal plan that we did. So I wanted consistency. You can see the highlight there. It almost looks like an octa in the egg, but that could be just as easy as a window light. But yeah, that was my thing. It was the last light octa, medium octa, a couple of speed lights in it. That has now become my go-to for effectively window light. It's the most beautiful, prettiest light, and it's easy. It just works every time. When I'm in restaurants, this is something that I almost have to use flash every time, and I'm just so glad that I have got a certain look that looks natural but also gives a bit of sparkle. Because if you're shooting a restaurant like this was shot in September down in Oxford, not Oxford, Windsor, it's dark outside. You can see it's the setup very similar to this. As you can see, it's dark outside. I've got one reflector with a soft silver giving me a bounce, and I've got a feathered off octa on the right giving me my main light. I feather it off because that setup is creating this shot you're looking at now. I feather the light off so less falls onto the seating behind, because I didn't want that to compete with the highlights that you can see here on this glistening dish. But restaurant photography is a whole new world that takes your food photography to an entirely different level, because you have so many different aspects that you have to do. It's not just food anymore. It's interiors, exteriors, group shots, headshots, food, action shots. And you're working in a really exciting and vibrant environment, which I love. It's just intoxicating. This is one of the group shots that has floated around an awful lot. This was from my very first restaurant shoot. with Robin Gill. So this is the rooftop garden. You can see the beehive over on the left behind that chef. A lot of the key chefs here are still with him. I was teetering on the edge of the roof where there's a drop in between the two buildings. I think 70 to 40 lens, and there's a couple of different angles for this. But yeah, you have to try and get good at all different types of photography, which I love that whole aspect. So again, you got a fun sort of portrait of chef and the manager. I'm also looking at, like with the glasses, I'm looking at marketing shots that they can use to overlap with text, or they can use it as a back image on a website, which they can put a soft image behind. Some sort of interior stroke action shots here in the bottom right. That was at Yamamomo, I think it's called, a Japanese restaurant. Lots of cool textures and lights, and you know, a slower shutter speed, and you get a bit of action blur, because frankly, chefs don't stand around for very long. They don't tend to stand still for your beautiful shots. But to work in restaurants, you have to really understand them, especially at the level of the chefs that I'm working with. But any chefs really, you have to really understand where they come from. You have to celebrate food. You have to be as passionate about it as they are. But from your own industry, you need to bring your A game, the same A game that they bring every single day, and they'll really appreciate it, and they recognize that in you. You're capturing action shots, so you're working in their environment, and they move really fast and very deliberately. So you have to learn how kitchens work, where to be, listen and watch what's going on, so you know where to be and where not to be, where the chefs are likely to be. You need to move quickly. They'll appreciate you diving in for a shot and getting out of the way at the same time. So you've got to be fast, deliberate, and know what you're getting. Get your settings and everything all in order, so you're just basically looking for the shot. Read what's going on around you, and watching your peripheral vision all the time, because I mean, the chef you see on the left here, on numerous occasions, he literally ran to the fridge to get stuff that he needed to make the next dish. But learning all of these things and being able to work better in their environment builds trust, and you come back with the goods, and they'll want to have you back in, because you weren't a pain in the backside to work with. You understood what you did, what they did. They sense your passion for what you're doing, and matching it and blending it in with their passions. This shot here was taken for Art Culinaire magazine. That's Lee Westcott. He's the typing room in Bethnal Green is his restaurant. This was the closest I've come to what I call the Joe McNally shot. It's I had about a minute to get this portrait of him before he ran off for service. I put one speed light and a softbox over on the left. I took a couple of shots, but it was getting dark at that point. Well, it wasn't getting dark, it was already dark, and there was nothing coming out of those back windows, and I wanted something to come through from the street, because they were just looking like black holes, and it just didn't work, especially with the black lights in front. So I started to ramp down my shutter speed, and at the time I really wasn't paying a huge amount of attention to the shutter speed, I have to admit. I was just dialing it in and went, no, I need to go slower and slower, drag the shutter. I shoved my elbows in, and as I'm talking to you, I'm doing it right now. I'm shoving my elbows into my ribs, pressing the camera against, steadying myself. I've got the image stabilizer on. I'm probably at about f5.6, something like that. And I'm taking the shot, and I'm using the flash duration to freeze the action. Combine that with the image stabilizing of the lens and me hunkering down and staying as tight as possible. I heard the shutter speed going off, and I think it's 1/16 of a second or something like that. And it still came out sharp. So flash duration can save your backside on a number of occasions, but it's something you have to practice. And you'd be surprised how many times I've gone back to that setup and I've taken shots before, because before you didn't think you could do it, and then you do it, and suddenly now it becomes possible for you. One of the, this was during the shoot for Paradise Garage, and I wanted to take in the atmosphere and the area that the restaurant is in. There's a couple other bars, a couple other restaurants. This is the place that I went to where I tested the 6D and the 5D3. Funny enough though, this shot is taken with the 1DS Mark III on a tripod. I think a 17-40 lens or something like that, or 24mm prime maybe. But I'm capturing the whole essence of where it is. So it's not just come to this restaurant that it's fantastic. This is the vibe that's going on at the restaurant, and that's what I wanted to tell. And this was December, I think this was. So it wasn't December. It was summertime. That's right. It was summertime. That's why I had to be there. I had to be there so late, so that I could get the night sky and I get this glow of the light. But yeah, that was. That's kind of like, if you like, the architecture and the storytelling of restaurants. So as we've talked about, I'm the other half of Salted Mint. It's a culinary blog. It's about healthy eating now. Deb being the chef and the entire brains behind all of the dishes. She comes up with some utterly stunning recipes, and it's pretty food that I get to shoot. It's just amazing. There I am. There's all my social media, which I think we've got links to on the webinar. And that's about it. That was a quick run through of food photography from my point of view. And I'm so pleased that we're still here at 50 minutes over, but I'm okay with that if you guys are.
Pretty much everybody has stayed with us, and a few people have said sorry, but well, thank you for a great webinar. Before we will go through all the questions, guys, so we'll answer everything that you've asked us so far, but I will say we'll have to just get through what we've got rather than you add no more questions in for us, guys. Jonathan, you also have something that you're going to share with them, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I have a photo shoot planner. It's just like it's a very basic sort of layout, easy for printers, print it easy. And it's on my website. If you go to my website, within a couple of seconds, you'll see a little drop-down menu, a sign-up, like an email sign-up thing. If you go to that, you pop in your email, and it'll give you the option to download a PDF for this. And this is basically just a shoot planner, which says, I'm going to do this kind of dish. I'm going to do a breakfast. I want this kind of light. I want these crops for this, that, and the other, a Facebook crop or an Instagram. It's just so you don't miss a shoot. A shot that you want to do, and you cover all your bases. What's your hero shot? Where are we going to use this? Is it for a client? All of this. It's just a cheat sheet for you to write down your ideas, so it's planned before you go into the shoot. It makes life so much easier. There's nothing worse than coming from a shoot and you go, damn it, I didn't get a shot of this, or I didn't get a crop that I could use for XYZ. Maybe you want to make it a new banner for your Facebook page, but you didn't shoot a wide top-down shot that would look really cool for that. So it's just things like that. It's something that we use a version of, depending on what we're doing. If it's more of a client shoot, then we definitely write everything down, make sure we don't miss a beat. When it's just our own stuff, we've just got a system. We've done it so many times, but we did used to use something very much like this. And if you've signed up on my website, I do kind of tutorials, I do tips on my website. So if you're interested in that kind of thing in food photography, sign up and you'll get it in your email. And drop me lines with questions, and absolutely love to hear from you guys and answer any questions you've got. And sometimes those questions you ask lead me into thinking, well, hang on, this should be a blog post. So I don't just necessarily go into just a quick answer for you. I might actually then go, okay, this is worth going into in a little bit more depth, and maybe video as well. I'm starting to move towards doing video stuff. So if there's enough people, or I think the subject's big enough, then I can actually do a post on it and much fuller answer to your questions.
Brilliant, mate. Well, I was going to cheekily say tonight, but you've just kind of touched on it, so I'm hoping that the answer is going to be yes. But I'd love to send Sam up to do some film with you anyway for us, and obviously you can have that back. I think it'd be great to see you at work if you're up for that. So
that'd be fantastic, yeah.
Brilliant.
Absolutely.
I didn't think you'd have a problem after me getting to know you, but you kind of said about video then. Well, let's do it, because I'd love to, I'm sure as they're asking, people have already asked mine. We'd love to see it in practice, and so thrilled with that. So we'll get that happening without a doubt. Before we get into the questions, and we will go through them, everybody. So Jonathan's happy to stay with us. I've kept a few left. A few for you to share with you. I'm officially now starving. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Not me, even though that I am, but this is what's coming through. And this is what I loved. And John, if you heard my conversation with John before we started tonight, this is from John. He's on a Slimming World diet, so that was almost impossible to watch at times. Incredibly 3D and freshly cooked. Salted meat, healthy eating. That's what I've been informed, John. You need to go and check it out. He's given me advice on healthy ice cream, John. Believe it or not. I'm impressed. I'm impressed. But yeah, I've lost 4 stone. I think I've just put it back on in the last hour, mate. Thanks for that.
Yes, that was my pleasure. It couldn't be. There's no better way to put on weight than in a delicious manner.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Right, let's get through some of these questions then.
Absolutely.
Quite a few people asked about stylists, not so styling yourself or actually getting in food stylists, or do you find that in the restaurant, although obviously you leave the chefs to it, what sort of goes on there?
Yeah, when it comes to the restaurants, especially the level I've been privileged to work with, yeah, you don't need to do it. They are basically your food stylists. But definitely reach out to food stylists. Maybe you can collaborate. Maybe there's lots of people that are interested in food styling that may not be out there doing it as a full career, or maybe they want to practice and they want to get they need images for their portfolio too. So working with food stylists could certainly help you out. Definitely on bigger projects. Sometimes they bring in they sort out the team, so they get their photographers, they get their food stylists that they like to work with, and they get their art directors and such like, and you get brought in as part of the team. But it's still a great idea to hook up with various people. I know a lot of food stylists that do stuff with Jamie Oliver, that work with David Loftus, if you've heard of him. He does a lot of Jamie Oliver's food photography. I think Jamie actually does some of his own photography now. But yeah, hook up with them and see what they want to do. You may find in culinary schools, there may be actually people going to culinary school, which they don't always come out of there as chefs. You know, some of them are food writers, and some of them will be food stylists, but you need an understanding of food in order for you to be able to work in the food industry, if that makes sense to you.
Absolutely, yeah, no, it does fully. How much pre-planning is involved in a shoot, and do you actually factor that in when you quote for the job?
Yeah, if it's an outside job, then yeah, because we may have something that a client may come to you and they want sort of 5 dishes actually created as far as designing the menu, if you like, designing the dish, then creating it, photographing it, styling it, and all that good stuff. But there's a lot of Deb is the go-to for that. So we very much work as a team in that respect. She'll give them back ideas about these are the recipes that she comes up with, and she's been in the industry and worked at such a level that very few people come back and go, ooh, that doesn't sound very nice. They might not know what it is. They might not understand exactly what it is, in which case you can explain it to them. But even if it's just a shoot and we're doing it for Salted Mint, doing it for the blog, we have it planned out what we're going to be doing that day. You know, there may be 3 or 4 dishes that we're going to create, style and shoot, edit that day, kind of grouping it all together so that we can get the blog post done in a smaller amount of time, or compressed amount of time. One, it's good for deadlines. It makes sure that you stay honest and you crack on with the job rather than spreading it over 5 days, because projects tend to do that. They fill whatever gap it is that you want to give them. But there's also so many other things that we're doing. We're creating products for the blog. We have client work coming in. So you very much want to plan every individual shoot out to the 10th degree. We tend to do one project at a time. So if we were working for a client, we would do everything for that client as much as we could all in one day. So you stay in the zone, stay in the feel of whatever it is they want, because it might not be our style, but we will adapt and fit the style and look that they want. It will always have our influence on it, but it becomes more of a collaboration then.
Brilliant. So I've got 2 prongs to the next question, because they came from 2 different people, but they're about the similar one. It's about steam. So sometimes we're presuming this is the question, that obviously some things come out piping hot. can that affect, obviously, your photograph if you're too close? Can steam, and is there a way around it?
Usually what you want to do, if there's steam involved in the shot, you actually want to capture some of that. And that is done in the same kind of way as smoke is, where you have light coming from the back and coming through it. Not necessarily directly from the back, but from behind it and shining through it in order for it to show up. And of course, steam is pretty much white. So if you have a dark background behind it somewhere, for it to contrast, so the light comes through, shines through the water droplets, and it stands out because there is a darker background behind it in order for it to show up. If you think of driving in fog, if you put your high beam on in fog, it hits the fog and bounces right back, and all you get is white. Well, it's the same as if you try and light steam from the front. It loses all of its shape. So you want to light through it rather than have the light bouncing back at the camera. But yes, if it's really, really hot and you're quite tight on the shot, then yeah, it is kind of likely to fog up your lens. If I'm doing really tight shots these days, I use 100mm macro. So I don't tend to have to get in that tight. If you had like a lot of people got like a 70 to 200. I have one which I love doing portraits and things with it. I mean, you may be halfway across the room, but you can always zoom it out to 200mm and see what kind of look and crop you get. So if you only had like a 50mm lens and a 70 to 200, I would put the 70 to 200 on, stand well back and zoom it in and try and get your shot that way. That, or as tends to be the case with food photographers, we get used to tasting warm food because we kind of play around with stuff and change the styling, and unless it's a temperature sensitive like ice cream or something like that, you may want to change things around and tweak the styling a little bit. Maybe you want to make things look a little shinier, maybe a few droplets of water on the herbs and things to kind of freshen it up a little bit, or maybe on a salad, those kind of things. But yeah, only if you get really, really tight will that be a problem. But I have had the odd situation when I've gone in shot really quick. So I go in, take a couple of shots and pull the lens away, and very quickly does it unfog. But yeah, it doesn't happen very often.
Great, Bert. I'm not sure if you mentioned this when you were talking about when we were talking about kit and your shooting method, so I kept it in case I missed it.
Okay.
Do you favour aperture or shutter priority?
Neither. I shoot manual.
Do you know what? I knew you were going to answer that question, but I thought it was just as well to keep it.
If I was going to do either, I would shoot aperture priority, because the aperture has a much greater effect on the look of the image. So something I haven't really gone into in this particular point, but when you're shooting a dish, before you style it, decide where you want to shoot it from, where you're going to start. That will dictate where the camera is, in the direction of which you style it. Because if you're shooting in portrait, like a lot of food photography is for our blog, you need to go long and narrow in your styling. There's no point going wide or square, because your crop is going to be rectangle in one particular direction or the other. So that would then also dictate what lens am I going to use, so how close am I to the subject. That will then be your aperture that will affect that. Yeah, if I was going to, I would do aperture priority if I was going to use either of those two.
Brilliant. I hang on to this one as well. I thought this was quite a good question, and I think you kind of answered it, but it's specifically about when working with a restaurant. Would you ever be inclined to take your own prop in, or do you usually tend to use the cutlery and everything from the actual restaurant itself?
It would depend on the restaurant I went to. I would talk to them prior to it. If it was a less of a more casual restaurant, there may be opportunities for you to take certain things with you. Take a look at their decor beforehand. If they're close by, to go in and see them. You might have something that you could either make, buy, pick up, take with you, that might work a little better than what they have, and then you can talk to them about it. How about if it works like this? Maybe you want a rustic wood look for, I don't know, burger barn, or I don't know what the restaurant would be called, but if it was that, maybe you could take the rustic kind of country barn part of the title and bring that into it. So there are things like that that you can do. If a restaurant's actually, here's a kind of thing that you might not think of, if a restaurant is still being built, which is often the case when they're trying to get the menu together, you may end up going to a studio and shooting at a studio with a kitchen, and they will take aspects of the restaurant. So maybe they've got a sample of the tabletop or the countertop and this and that, so you can actually reconstruct what the restaurant would look like and basically have a very small mini staged part of what will be the restaurant. So you can take aspects of what the restaurant's going to be designed in, and tabletops and stuff, and take it to a studio and shoot it there, and it kind of looks like it will do when it's in the restaurant later on. That way a restaurant can market long before the paint has dried and all the problems of starting and refurbishing a restaurant are taken into account. You can have all of this stuff ready to go, because it's so important for these restaurants to get people in through the door the second that they can get them in, because the investment that they put in is beyond what you would ever dream of spending on a business. It's serious big money involved. We're talking, on several of the restaurants I've worked in, we're talking 2, 3 and 4 million pounds.
Brilliant. We're getting there. A couple left. Quite a few people asked, obviously you talked, and we've seen now obviously in the behind the scenes photographs, that you favour the off-camera flashes, obviously speed light. Is it ever studio flash as well, or do you prefer speed light?
I don't have any studio style lights at the moment, simply because I just travel very light. If I'm into London itself, I've got a roller bag and I have my backpack with all my kit in it, so I'm trying to keep things as light as possible. Let me see, how many shots? I don't even remember how many shots. I've done a full day shoot at the Oxford Blue, which is the restaurant that you've seen, which is all dark blue inside, kind of this one. I've shot all day in there doing this kind of stuff, and I've had 2 speed lights in the Octa there on the right. I
just gave you the screen back, Jonathan. Sorry, because I'd taken the screen back. So
that's all right. Sorry, mate. There we go. So this setup here with the Octa on the right, it's got 2 speed lights in it. Just got regular. It's got rechargeable Eneloop batteries in it, and I've shot all day on just one set of batteries in each speed light. And I've done hundreds of shots because it's close in. I'm not using massive power. You know, they're about a quarter power-ish, something like that, depending on the setup. So they last all day long. There's no real need for me to go with a studio head. But having said that, there are some very cool bits of kit out there now, which gives me significantly more power. In a pretty compact sort of unit. But again, it goes back to what I was talking about with my camera. It's a case of, look, I've got the kit that I've got. I might as well use it rather than go and buy something else because it's working for me. There are now occasions that I'd come to that I'd want to do like a portrait outside, and you know, when the sun is kicking my backside for me and I need some significant power in order to battle the sun. On those occasions, I would use one of those smaller, but you know, more of a studio strobe. But until that becomes more of a problem for me, I'm not going to really bother too much about it. It would be cool to have, but I'm running a business. You know, it's not about having kit. It's about making good business choices. And if it doesn't pay for itself, if it can't pay for itself within 3 months, I'm not buying it. It's as simple as that.
Brilliant. Well, it was going to lead on to one of the last few questions. Was a few people asked about LED lighting today, continuous lighting, due to the fact that it's obviously cooler. Is that something you've thought about or entertained yet?
Yeah, I've taken a look at it. The prices of the units are coming down, which is helpful. Continuous light, a lot of people like to use continuous light for food photography because you can see where the shadows go, not just food, like products and kind of lifestyle product shoots where you see like diaries and pens and all that kind of stuff laid out on a tabletop, because you can see where the light goes, and you can bounce it back into specific spots with mirrors and those little round mirrors with that tilt, so you can use those for getting in. It's not something that, again, I've necessarily needed. I get the results I get with the kit that I've got at the moment. There's, like photography is, there are so many ways to tackle a certain problem. I use what I've got, I use what works at the moment, and I'm always looking for new ways or trying new stuff. We did food photography video for Lastolite, and they came here and we used some of the LED panels then. So it was kind of cool for me to get to use them. They don't have a huge amount of power, but most cameras these days can easily do 400 ISO and come out with beautifully clean files. There's never an issue anymore. It's something I've looked at. With me moving towards video, that's something that could shift my gear. Maybe I'll start shooting more continuous light and having equipment, lighting gear that I can use for both video and stills and get the look that I want. Ultimately, if the light quality isn't what I want, then I've got a bit of a struggle on my hands.
Brilliant. Okay, last two questions, Jonathan. So, so talking about going out, I know you said earlier a couple of times, you buy what you can afford, obviously, and you buy what you need to buy for the job. So looking at my first macro lens, what focal length macro lens would you recommend as the most universal if I could only budget for one lens to start with?
I guess that would vary depending on the camera body you've got, but if you're using what most people have got, kind of like a crop censored DSLR or a full frame, my go-to is the 100mm macro. Obviously it'll be a longer length depending if it's a Nikon or a Canon or whatever else it is. Crop sensor, I think Canon's 1.6, I'm not sure about Nikon. I would probably go with the 100 macro, but there's different manufacturers for different things. I'm not sure about the other camera body styles. I don't know what macro lenses are available to them. But yeah, that's what I've been using. I think I know a couple of people. I think there's a 90mm macro lens. That might be Nikon. I'm not sure. But yeah, somewhere around that focal length is a good length. That it's funny because if I shoot something at 70mm with a 2470, and I'll get a shot, and my 2470 actually allows for doing macro stuff, but it does, you get really close in then, and it kind of restricts a bit of the light getting into it. But somehow I stick the 100mm on, and whether I stick it on the 60 or I have a crop censored 80D, which I use mostly for video, even if I put it on there, somehow something about that lens and the focal length and the way it looks, I almost always put it on and come out with a shot that I like. I just like the way it looks, the way it crops. Yeah, it just works. So I guess 100mm for me, 100mm macro. There's two versions for Canon. Both of them are good. One's significantly cheaper than the other.
Excellent. Last question then. It's to do with your focus points. So obviously you were talking about sort of layered images and front and back and everything tonight. So you have a preferred focus point on your camera using back button focus. What's your go-to sort of focus method? Yeah,
I use back button focus all the time now. I guess I didn't. I don't know when I changed. But yeah, it just makes more sense. It also helps keep the camera steady. But something I couldn't really touch on so much here is your focus point in your food photography is pretty crucial. If you miss the point, you end up with an out of focus blob in the foreground. Sometimes you can focus a little further into the frame, and it's not distracting. Which is another reason why I shoot tethered, because I can see it right away, and if I'm not sure, I can try a couple of versions of it. And depending on how shallow I'm shooting, the thing that I find that most people don't get about the depth of field is that they focus very much on the aperture that they're using, when in actual fact the thing that I find has far greater effect is your proximity to the subject. If I fly back to the strawberries, or hang on, yeah, this one here, I am, what am I shooting here? So I've got the 85 1.2 on the extension, macro extension tubes. I'm shooting that at f8. So I'm really close in on there, and you can see how it's dropping out of focus in the foreground, and quite soon over the focus point is kind of the front part of the moose that's facing us.
Are you showing your screen again, Jonathan?
Yeah, I'm showing the screen. Sorry, mate. Yeah.
I'll have to give it back to you. Sorry.
Okay. No, that's all right.
It's coming over to you, mate.
All right. Here we go. Let's try this again.
There we go. We've got it. We've got it.
Yeah. So I'm using the 85 1.2 with the extension tubes on it. So you can see in the foreground how quickly it's dropping out, and this is at f8. Because my proximity to the subject is so close, that's having a far greater effect on the depth of field. I'm also at ISO 640 at an 80th of a second, so I'm having to use my ISO to compensate for the fact I've shut down the aperture, or else I'll have a tiny little bit of it in focus, which is completely missed the point of what I'm trying to do. So yeah, proximity too. So when you're using like extension tubes, you do tend to get really on top of the subject. So you might have to shut down your aperture a bit in order to get a depth of field which works for you, because that would be similar. So if I shot that with 100mm macro, obviously without extension tubes, I'm standing much further back. I'd be shooting at maybe 3.5, something like that, to get that kind of depth of field.
Absolutely brilliant, bud. Absolutely brilliant. Well, we're there. We got their record, a bit of an epic but brilliant webinar. Loads of feedback, as well as saying everybody's very, very hungry. Which we did warn them. So you know, and myself. As much as I said I ate beforehand on purpose, I'm now absolutely ravenous. So
ice cream, mate. Ice cream. That's what you need.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I think I'm having it now tonight anyway, mate. Definitely, even if Mel wants it, we're getting my. I kept this. This is brilliant, and I wanted to finish on this before I thank you. I'm looking at Jonathan's food on his website. I'm so hungry. Worse still, I have 2 starved days this week, and I picked this one as one. David, we won't tell anyone. Just, you know, we won't tell anyone, apart from the other 200 people online with us. Apart from that, David, I haven't given you surname, David, so you just go, you pretend it's, you know, do it tomorrow. Do it tomorrow.
Was it David that was looking for the healthy meal plans and stuff? Was it?
Well, I guess, yeah. Well, yeah, saltedmint.com. You can be healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, if he's got anything there with questions, Deb loves getting questions from people. You know, maybe people got allergies or they don't like certain things. There's going to be so much stuff put on there for like swapping out foods and different things for people's dietary and personal sort of challenges with eating. But yeah, if there's any of the dishes on there he's got any questions with, drop her a line. She'll love to hear from him, and she'll put him right and straight and narrow.
Well, I went and looked after we talked this morning, and you guys don't know obviously this, but I was sharing with Jonathan that I'm diabetic, and luckily enough I've worked hard enough to sort of get myself listed as not diabetic, but I jumped on the salted mint this afternoon, and obviously having what I loved about it was that, like, as you said, there was obviously the recipe is about you know, what you can still, you know, you can still have the things you love, but things you haven't thought about, and that's what. And I did it at lunchtime. I was looking at lunchtime, Jonathan, and it was just like, apt that I was looking at it at lunchtime. But it was just like, you know, yeah, okay, these are brilliant ideas. So you know, I've lost, you know, we've got into a bit of a food topic now, but I've lost it, but I've not gone without anything. I've just been responsible and a bit clever about it, and I feel better for it. But looking today, just from the salted mint and what you and your wife do, I know I'm going to be able to enjoy the long run.
Absolutely. So, but that's the thing, you see. That's I mean, as I started this whole thing, food just gets into every single part of your life, from like big events to just living healthy and being energized and stuff. It's such a key point. And if you get it right, it's just phenomenal, because the whole point is, I mean, diet, I know we're getting off on something else here, but your diet is what you need to be interested in, not going on a diet. And one of the two biggest things that we found that people struggle with is snacks, because I mean, carrot sticks are fine for day one, maybe day two. By day three, you want to stick a carrot stick up somebody's nose that offers it you. And by day four, that's it. You're just going to kill the farmer that grows the carrots. So you want something that's still tasty, that's still, you know, it feels like a treat, like a tiny little cupcake, caramel cupcake or something like that, but we'll do some alternatives for that, which are not caramel and sugar based, more fruit based. And then the second thing is dinner. Everybody struggles with dinner. What do you want tonight, honey? I don't know. Pick me something up from the supermarket. You know, everybody's busy, and the whole point of what we're doing there is to help people plan their eating, plan their life, and enjoy it. And if you really like cooking, if you even slightly like it, you know what, there's some of the dishes you're going to come out with, you're going to go, this is epic, I'm going to keep this up. And there's nothing better than to have, you know, 1% of the British population actually cooking that weren't before and enjoying themselves. Happy days.
Brilliant, mate. Well, thank you for not just sharing that, but thank you for sharing tonight. You know, I've loved it. And we've already been asking to have you back. We've discussed about what I put you on the spot and you said yes, we're filming. So I'm thrilled about that as well. So, and I'm sure we'll get, and don't forget guys, if you haven't seen it already, last month's issue of the magazine, Jonathan wrote a fantastic article for us on that as well, still available from the magazine page. Jonathan, from me to you, thank you so much for tonight, pal. You know, I've loved getting to know you over the last couple of weeks, and looking forward to meeting you properly. We'll have to go out for dinner. So,
absolutely, right. Absolutely. It's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege, mate. I'm honoured to be asked to be here and share what I know. I'm always learning something new, and whatever I come across that I don't know what I'm like everybody else, I just want to tell everybody if I've just discovered something. Oh my God, this is the coolest thing. Let me show you, you know, and then show me how it worked for you. You know, it's just fun to share.
I think you're going to be hopefully you're going to be a regular collaborator, because I love your attitude towards photography and sharing as well, Jonathan, and that's what we're all about here. So.
It's the Canadian in me, you see, because I'm British and Canadian.
I still can't hear it in your accent. You're telling me.
Yeah, well, I need to go back and live there for a little bit longer, maybe.